Hello, everybody. Welcome. We are back. And fun fact about me and Danielle is that we are both Aries risings, which is why we get along, and also probably why we're absolutely ridiculous together. But today we have something really exciting. We have a battle of the decks. So how this is going to work is we each have a deck, and we will be comparing a cross selection of some pre-selected cards that we decided on. We're going to show 6 majors, 4 courts, 1 from each suit, and 12 minors, 3 from each suit. And we'll go through each one card by card together.
We are asking 2 basic questions about each of these cards as we compare them. So what is each deck's take on a given archetype? What is its language? What makes it unique? Because at least my position, we'll talk a little bit about what our positions are on this. But I think we agree basically by doing this that the story of judgment, for example, is not the same in every deck. So we want to see how those languages speak to each other. And also our kind of spontaneous reaction to the art. Which one do we think is more pretty? Which one do we think is more evocative? That's why we're calling it a battle. Nobody's getting into a fist fight here. But it's sort of fun to put these 2 decks in conversation. I'll apologize now for getting over a cold. I sound worse than I am, but I'm busy feeling sorry for myself when we're not recording, so don't worry about me. And I'll just say quickly before we introduce our decks, Amelia and I have talked a little bit about some folks having the position that it is always the archetype and the art is a matter of indifference in a deck, right? So like you can have different decks, you think different art is pretty, but that is a matter of indifference when you're interpreting the tarot. That is not my position. As the person who is a literature professor, I think that like the arcs and nuances of language in text, even if it's a visual language and visual text, make all of the difference in telling a story. And I think a lot of cards, the best cards, I would argue, tell stories. So I think that those stories are really different, even if they all fit into the same bucket of judgment, for example. So I would suggest that there's a balance there to do, but I kind of love those provocative people who insist it's always the archetype, it's never the art. It shocks my my art-loving sensibility. But what is your position on that, Amelia?
As with all things that have 2 sides, I am the middle way through and through. I think that the art without the structure and foundation of what we in a modern sense know the tarot to be doesn't have a lot to hang itself on. But I also think that structure and foundation without the visual language of what's actually happening in the cards isn't anything on its own either. I think it's a little of both. Even going back to historic decks, and at least the way that I read historic decks is very much centered around what's on the card. What do you see? And that's what I read. But that's like, we have knowledge of the things that we've put into our heads over the years and years that we've been studying this. And so that's going to inform what I'm seeing, right? So I think it's a little of both. I think they come together to make a really delicious meal. And you can't really have one without the other. But
I would argue, I feel ridiculous sort of suggesting that it's exactly even. I'm going to make the claim that the art matters a little bit more than the archetype. That would be my argument, just to make an argument for the sake of arguing something. But let's see how these decks make us feel about like that position, our position, and see if our ideas about that shift at all. I'll introduce my deck. I am using the Ancestral Path Tarot. This is a mass market deck created in 1996 by Julia Cuccia Watts. I'm using one of her later editions that is borderless. It's still for sale, but I will say that I trimmed my edition a little bit, even though it was already borderless, because I have small hands. So I did in fact trim. I said that the art is sacrosanct. I trimmed some of the art off because it was more important to me to be able to use the deck. Not a lot, but if you get this deck, it's not going to look exactly like this. What deck are you going to be using, Amelia?
I have the Wheel of Change tarot, so another oldie but goodie. This one has been out since 1997. It's by Alexandra Ganetti. Here is the box top if you are unfamiliar with it. It's a Thoth-ish based deck. It's not Thoth. It's also not Rider-Waite-Smith. It kind of does its own thing. It is not mass market, but it is readily available on her website and very, very accessible. I think you can even find it on Amazon. It doesn't come with, but you can also purchase a like 300-page guidebook that's really meaty. Yeah, it's a fun, colorful, well, I won't show the images yet, but it's a fun deck. And I think it'll pair nicely with the Ancestral Path Tarot to see how they compare to each other. Yeah.
And as we get started, we'll see that Ancestral Path is certainly a Rider-Waite-Smith tradition deck. It's not at all a clone. We wouldn't choose a clone for something fun like this. That'd be kind of boring. But while yours, I think, definitely falls more outside of the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition, this may be familiar to folks who are primarily know those Rider-Waite-Smith archetypes. But let's get started. Of our 6 majors, I think we chose 6 majors. The very first one was the Fool. So let's take a look at our collective Fools.
All right, so here is the Fool. It's a very busy deck. This is very much like reminds me of a Thoth Fool.
Yes.
Yeah.
So so here are questions, right? What is each deck's take on the archetype? So what would I say about this Fool? And then what would you say about my Fool? I believe, I'm not positive, but I believe that this is a self-portrait of Julia Kuchia-Watts herself. That is the deck itself on the table. So as you see, the card backs here match the tarot deck that you find on the table. The idea, I've seen a lot of decks that have a tarot reader in the position of the High Priestess. I've never, I don't think, otherwise seen the Fool as a tarot reader, but maybe the querent is the Fool, like us approaching her table. I'm not really positive. I should read the book. I have the book, but I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to work with the art and responses for this. It is unusual. It's certainly a provocative Fool. If this is your only or first tarot deck, I don't think you come to the Fool with the sense of journey, maybe, as much as you do of asking a question or yeah. That's my kind of quick response about the archetype. What would you have to say about this?
I mean, it's a little tongue-in-cheek, isn't it? Like, I feel like there's a little bit, it's very self-referential, like to us as readers. You know, this feels very much like it's almost poking fun at itself.
Yeah.
Because there's the alternative interpretation is that we, the readers, are the fools. Like, we are the fool who thinks we can know anything from looking at a deck of cards. I don't know. It is evocative. But it's not. It's kind of funny and playful, which is a very Fool-like thing, I think.
She is holding the Fool. It's very cheeky. I think it's a very cheeky card. So let's see.
So this is the Wheel of Change Fool. Like I said, this feels very much like a Thoth Fool. Obviously, there are some key differences. Like the Fool is standing, not laying down, because he's in water in the Thoth, right? Like he's like floating in the water. But he's taking a similar position. The water is kind of coming up and flowing around him. Let's see, we have the roses, which is in the fox, or, some kind of animal, which is like a Rider-Waite-Smith reference. We do have the cliff, although we have 2, and the Fool is standing on both sides. I don't know if you can see it. The like doves up here are holding Taro, tarot. This has the flavor of a traditional Fool. And by traditional, I mean like what we're used to seeing with either Rider-Waite-Smith, Thoth, TDM, like all of those types of Fools. It has a lot of influence from all of those different, traditions. There's youth, there's joy, there's kind of, reckless abandon, and all of the things that the Fool is. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think about this Fool?
I think that you hit it on the head. I have to tell you, when I look at that, the first thing I see, which is in part the first thing I noticed when I looked at the Thoth Fool, is that big kind of solar groin placed, the power coming from the center there. It is an extremely energetic card. That's a youthful Fool, like you said. There's synergy, like the world is moving around him. And it is a different register. This is where I would say, right, the art has to matter if you're reading these two Fools. Or what else are we doing? So I think that the Fool is doing something totally different here. I would want, well, which
What
one
do we think is the winner? What do we pick?
I like the art of my Fool better. I like this scene. I would walk into it, but there's something as a card, as a tarot card, that I like about your Fool better. I think that functions as a Fool better.
I think if we want to lean into art solely, I think this communicates more what a Fool is. I think the Ancestral Path Fool, like, you kind of already, and this is what I'm talking about, you kind of already have to have that kind of structural knowledge in order to really have any context for that card. But I like it as a tarot reader, as somebody who does know that structure of tarot. I like that Fool, but I do think I have to pick the Wheel of Change, or Wheel of Time, Wheel of Change. And
I should mention, right, like, this deck isn't just called Ancestral Path. It is meant for ancestor work. That's work that you're looking to do. So as far as what I would say, I would ask a Fool to do in the average deck, or even in an ancestrally oriented deck, I prefer your Fool. But as we talk about this art and the effectiveness of the cards and their language, we should at least keep in mind that for this deck, it's asking itself to do something a little different. Or Julia, the artist, is asking it to do something different. Let's take a look at our emperors.
Yeah, this is the next card. I specifically wanted to do this card because I think it is one that a lot of people, and we've talked about this a lot, there are a lot of people that hang a lot of things on the Emperor. And so you get a lot of those projections on the way artists create the Emperor. And, like, no judgment at all. You do you. Like, I'm not making a deck. So I'm always curious to see what deck creators do with the Emperor. So anyway, here we have our emperors. These are they're both very regal.
They are. I think these emperors would be friends. I would say, if we're talking about what is each deck's take on the emperor, I would say it's approximately the same. Like, he is an older man. He's enthroned. He owns his space. He's gazing directly at us. There is a lot of solar, red and yellow energy here, authority. So I think that, like, we are safely within the boundaries of what we would expect of a, quote, traditional emperor. And that is an archetype that I think is less confusing than it is challenging for people because of the baggage that we often as readers attach to the emperor. I mean, about that, a lot of us come to tarot, we are already people less inclined to respond well to a certain kind of paternalistic or religious authority. We want a little more flexibility, and there's a lot of wounding attached to the patriarchy and a lot of wounding attached to organized religion that I think makes people react really strongly to the Emperor and the Hierophant as permanent shadow cards. So if I look at this art, like, I feel comfortable with him, right? I find this emperor approachable, and that is not true for every emperor. I don't need my emperor to be approachable, but I do like his scene, and I also feel like I could maybe sit in his throne.
So, a couple things that I noticed about these two cards that I like. First off, I like in the Ancestral Past Tarot, I like his horns.
Yeah.
I like that little Aries reference. As we mentioned, we are both Aries risings. So I think
That's why we like the Emperor.
maybe that is why we like the Emperor. So I like that little nod there. For this guy, what I love is he has, you and I have talked about this before, like the Emperor is a protector and he needs something to protect, right? He needs a kingdom to defend. And I like that you can see behind him the open doors. You can see a kingdom that he's defending, or that he's kind of standing between you and, you, the viewer, and the kingdom behind him. So I appreciate that little nod here. I have to say, though, I think I like the Ancestral Path better.
I do. And in part, I just like the perspective. I like that we're closer to him.
Mhm.
A lot of what I like about him, I also like about that card. I like that he's directly facing us. I like the facial expression. I think the facial expression really matters on an emperor because he is such a fraught card so often. But I just like this art style. I mean, in part, we chose decks that we're like, ooh, pretty art. And I just think this is a lovely piece of art and really clear, really clear. But I think they both do the job. I would put these, I'd give these some parity.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so next we have the Hierophant, another card that people tend to hang on. Ooh, okay. We've got some similar but different.
We are,
Interesting.
what a pair. So yours has a Mesopotamian crown, I believe. So I think that is a Babylonian or Mesopotamian crown, and it looks, that is not a living figure. Is it? This is like a statue where people are showing devotion, or.
Yeah.
And this is the seeking the oracle sort of Hierophant. This is another instance. It's fascinating to me, decks that kind of play with what we do with the magician, the high priestess, and the Hierophant. There's a lot of, really, the high priestess and the Hierophant, a lot of melding and switching there. I have seen a lot of high priestesses that look like this, maybe without the people, right? But look like her. This as Hierophant says something much different with the acolytes there, or the students, than it would if it was a high priestess card. But there is oracular. This is Sibyl. This feels like Sibyl. I call us in our blog, joke around about how we're her acolytes. This feels like, and there is obviously a very feminine energy here, a lot of Greek mythology, bringing that kind of tradition and spiritual reservoir of, of storytelling to this card. So this is a very certain kind of take on the Hierophant, and I like it. How about yours?
I think mine is a much more this is tradition of a different flavor. I know traditionally the Hierophant is the Pope. That's who he is in the TDM. I actually don't know who is. He's the Pope in the Visconti deck, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he's the Pope in the Visconti deck. So but this is just a different flavor. This is that same idea placed within a different religion, essentially.
Exactly.
And so I think there's a bit more of that tradition here. To me, the Ancestral Path Hierophant speaks to the experience of tradition more so than this does.
I agree with that. So I think this has a lot of, sometimes you see the Hierophant as the teacher, especially when people start renaming this card. This is a card that gets renamed a lot because of the baggage attached to it. So I've seen this card as a teacher, as a librarian. I would say that this is a teacher, wisdom, myth, guidance connected Hierophant. I think your Hierophant is about, like, in some ways about religious practice, devotion, the, the like shared community of practice.
Mm-hmm.
So those are just very different hierophants, I think.
Yeah. All right. Wheel of Fortune. This is my favorite card in a tarot deck. I love the wheel.
It's so wild. I've never heard anyone say that.
I love the wheel. Okay, so we both got something really cosmic going on for both of these cards. You've got, that's the zodiac, right?
Let's see what we have. Yep, we have the zodiac. We have something very cosmic, the planets. We have references to, there's a kind of timelessness here. There are, like Stonehenge kind of, it is like across history. There's timelessness. What do you notice on yours?
Well, first off, I mean, this is like, we've got the sun at the center of the universe. There's like a Milky Way sort of reference here. The sun at the center of our solar system with all of the planets circling around it. You also have a sun in yours, kind of, although less central and more in the background. And there are like planets going on. Here's why I love the wheel. And I think both of these cards speak to it, but I do think the Wheel of Change speaks to it a little bit more. I love the wheel because it's just like, these are the facts of life. Like, love them or hate them, this is what it is. It is life, and it is everything that life encompasses. And your job is to ride the ride. And I think this speaks, to me at least, a little bit more of that. I don't want to say lack of agency, because I do think we have agency, but like that, like, how do I put this? Lack of interference that we have in the facts of life, like in what it means to be a human alive in the world right now. And I think, I think this speaks a little bit more to that, just because like the sun is at the center of our solar system, and it will rise again, whether we want it to or not, and the planets will circle around it. There are 365 days, like all of these things.
So I think this card is doing two things. I think it's doing that, exactly what you're saying. There's a sense of motion, like the planets moving, the endless cycle, what you're talking about. But there's also, and I think it's directly connected to the theme of the deck, the idea of ancestral history and that kind of timelessness, like the sum total of time passing. I know that we were talking the other day when you said the shocking thing that this is one of your favorite cards in a deck. I've been married for a long time now, and I'm like, there's nothing he can say to surprise me. We've talked about tarot for years together, and sometimes I'm like, I know everything about her. You blew my mind with this fortune thing. No idea what you're talking about. So it's interesting to think about this card. But when we were talking about it, I mentioned that the Somnia Tarot for the Wheel of Fortune has a grandfather clock on fire. And that is a really unusual, depiction of the Wheel of Fortune that I'd never thought about or seen before. And the idea of like time's passing, like the fire's going, there is something of that here. Like, so it's not just this cycle, but it's like time's moving forward. Time is burning. Too bad, so sad. But I think because this deck is supposed to be doing our ancestral journey, there's an idea that we can move in this space. And that's exciting and like kind of stimulating. I like this art better. So as far as like our battling these two decks together, I just like this art better. I find it more aesthetically satisfying. It's such a kind of a lazy, like, I just think it's prettier, but I just like this image better than I like that image.
No,
And I do think, yeah, what's your taste?
I mean, I think I don't know. I like the art in both of them. It's like depending on the day, and the mood that I'm in. but I think for me, the Ancestral Path Tarot, what it's speaking to is like how humans, like the observance of this passing of time, especially with like we've got Stonehenge in the back, like, you know, all of that stuff. And I think that's a take, and I think it's great, and I think I have nothing wrong with that. I don't know. I like that. I like the art. I like the art of the Wheel of Change, and I like the kind of like feeling of smallness that I get when I look at that. Like I don't feel it's like my problems are nothing when compared to like the size of the universe, you know?
I think that wheel is more, if we're thinking of these archetypes as, you know, we're looking at the language register of these decks, and their style of speaking, I think that your representation of the wheel there is more elastic. It can speak to more is more flexible for different kinds of questions than I think this wheel would be. At least for me, I think it'd be easier for me to read that wheel in certain kinds of contexts. How about our Hanged Man? So as we share this, you have known this. This is something you've known about me for years, and my response to tarot art. I am highly reactive to images of pregnancy and fetuses and childbirth, like actual child delivery. I had some of those decks. I sent one your way. Yes, I've come to terms with it. Just to be clear, because I know a lot of people are really defensive or reactive to that. Believe me, people, I understand this is my shadow. There is nothing wrong with the inclusion of that art, but I am certainly, as the person looking at this image, I hate the word triggered, but I am triggered by an image like this. It is not my favorite card for that reason. Here's our Hanged one, though. And how about your Hanged Man?
Nudity warning. Yeah, mine is very traditional. We've got a man hanging upside down. Bada bing, bada boom. I mean, as a person who has gone through pregnancy and given birth, I totally get that Hanged Man. Like that is, it speaks to me on a physical level that I cannot even put to words. Her Mott Tarot, the devil is a woman giving birth, right? I mean, that's one of those, I cannot tell you why I see that and go, but I do. And it's the same with this Hanged Man. I think I could probably find words more easily for this. I mean, this is the moment before, you know, before the beginning. Like this is like a fetus is suspended. They can't do anything. They're stuck in there until they're done developing. It's a bit of a chrysalis period, if you will. I know a lot of people like to depict chrysalises in Hanged Man cards. So I think, you know, I think that is like, that's the human version of that. I like it. It's evocative. It speaks to a primal, like human instinct, I think. Maybe instinct is the wrong word, but it speaks to me very primally. Yeah, this is, I'm looking at it and I'm not showing you. This is to me much more of a traditional Hanged Man. I do like that we have the Milky Way in the background there, like through a window. So it's like we've moved past the wheel. I mean, we're at, you know, the next 2 cards later, but there's still that kind of influence of the wheel. We even have this like kind of circular thing here, which I think is kind of interesting to think about, like what influence does the wheel have on the Hanged Man? But other than that, this is pretty traditional.
I think yours is more capacious, is more roomy, right? Because like we have Robert M. Place in his decks referencing the old tradition of the Hangman being the traitor. Benabel's SKT, Spirit Keepers Tarot, calls this card the outlaw. I think and then there are the kind of the self-sacrifice, like there are different accounts of the Hanged Man. The pause, like, is it suffering or is it surrender? there is room to see all of that in your hanged man. It's more symbolic. I think that like this deck creator had a very clear sense of what the hanged man is, and that's communicated here. And maybe this is a helpful approach if we're in the landscape of the ancestral work. This like makes sense as the theme appropriate take. But I don't think there's a way that I could read this hanged man or hanged one as a traitor, or as, you know, as Judas hanging upside down, or as an outlaw. This is suspension and gestation and chrysalis and all of that. And there's a lot there to work with. But I do find your version, aside from just, I'm always going to like, you could show me just about any hangman, and I'd prefer that art to this art because of my stuff. But I prefer a more flexible version of the hanged man. And so I like the room in your archetype for all kinds of interpretation.
Okay. All right. Final major is Judgment. This is another card that people tend to change the title of. And just generally kind of, here's what I find about Judgment Index is that if the title isn't changed, the art is kind of really non-committal and vague.
We both like historical tarot. And so I think we have, in some ways, embraced the idea of the original foundation of this archetype being the last or final judgment. This is like, that is a really big thing, like the final accountability, the final judgment day. Sometimes we see this card as awakening, or yeah, there are different versions of this, like a kind of
I do like the Thoth Eon version of Judgment.
I know you love that one, and that is a take. I don't think that is. I see that as a meaningful difference between Thoth and RWS. They are both Golden Dawn decks, but that particular, some cards are just like, oh, those are meaningfully different. This Judgment, I think, is beautiful, but this is a very specific. I don't know how you can look at this and suggest that like the art is a matter of indifference. So what do we have? We have a woman underwater. It looks like she's waking up, and she is swimming to the surface into the light. So she's been in the depths. She is finally awake, and she is going to be able to breathe again and come out of the depths that she's been in. It doesn't look like she's been suffering, right? This doesn't look like, oh, she's escaping this awful place. I'd like to take a nap. So this kind of looks lovely, and it's beautiful, but there is a sense of recovery here and coming out of something. Like,
is there a person on the other side of the water there in the top corner?
I think that is her reflection, but it could be someone but what I've taken this to be is her reflection.
Okay. Interesting.
What is your take on this card?
I see a lot of what you're saying. I'm trying to make out what that like square is, what the orange square is.
Head?
Okay.
I could be entirely wrong, but isn't that a headboard?
Reflective. I'm confused.
A mirror, like there is some something unclear, and I think it's supposed to be unclear. It could be that I have old eyes, but I do think there's supposed to be a kind of like precisely what is happening. We're not really sure. I think we're supposed to see a headboard, but there is supposed to be, I mean, if she's coming out of a sense of like a lack of clarity or a distorted world where things aren't clear underwater, I think that like that layering represents that distortion. The world doesn't look the way it's supposed to look where she's been sleeping, but she's awake now. So that is a very specific story of judgment. It is very different than your story. What is your story? Let's take a look.
Okay, so we have this person sitting in a garden. Again, the majors in this deck, a lot of them have almost like there's like an outer space or cosmic piece to it, whether it be around or in the background or something like that. So we've got it at the bottom here. and he is reaching high. There's a lot of light in the back. It looks like the sun is rising again. We have some what looks to be standing stones on the hills in the back.
That is transparently kind of a graphic depiction of birth, right? Like those hills are breasts. We see at the top of the hills kind of what look to be nipples. We have this
I mean, here's the birth canal down here at the bottom.
Coming out of the birth canal. So that is literal rebirth. That feels more like an Eon card, like the birth of Horus to me, than it does a final judgment card or an awakening card.
Well, so Alexandra Gannett in her big book, it does cite the Thoth as a really that's where she draws most of her influence from. And I think you can see that in certain cards like this. Like this is definitely a rebirth. It lacks, here's what I'll say though. I like how metal the Thoth deck takes the Eon card. I mean, I love it. It is vivid. It paints a vivid picture of what the Eon is, and you can feel it. This is like the little girl in church growing up that loved Revelation, though. Like,
you were that girl. That girl means
yes. I mean, who doesn't want like an angel with however many eyes? I can't remember, but yes, so this is like a softer take on that, but yes, this is a rebirth card, or it's the moment before rebirth. Like this is the like preparation for that.
Yours is joyful. So if I'm thinking about the energy that we immediately get, if we have a spread and we're doing kind of a quick impression based reading, like that looks intense, that looks heavy or angry. Mine, this art feels like it has a sense of like recovery, like, ooh, I can catch my breath. And your card has, I like how I'm just calling these art. This is my art. This is not Julia Kuchiwa's art. My deck. In my deck, there's that feeling. In your deck, it feels more joyful. Like that feels like a joyful scene. And I think that that's okay. I think this is a perfect example of the really different registers and languages of these two decks takes on the archetype. As far as like a reading, I am a Thoth reader. I'm not only a Thoth reader, but I do like the Thoth tradition. And I like the Eon. So I think I like that as an archetypal representation more. As simply as a piece of art, I would put this art on my wall in my house. I think this is absolutely stunning.
Yeah, there is a time and a place when that card could bring me to tears.
Oh,
but
yeah.
There is also a time and a place when that card, when I would pull that card and I would have to do a lot of work to apply it to what I came to the cards for. And again, we did establish from the beginning that Julie Kuchia-Watts made this deck for ancestral work. It's for a very specific type of, it has a purpose, right? And so I'm not expecting it to be able to do all things. But I would have to do less mental work to make that judgment fit. I say that the Wheel of Change is judgment.
To be more elastic, more roomy. Absolutely. We're getting into our courts now, and we are looking at both of us have princesses, princes, queens. I have kings, you have knights as the trump. We are going to be looking at the courts and then the minors in the order of wands, cups, swords, and pentacles, or are the name of that suit for our deck. So the first court that we're looking at is the wands or fire, and in this deck it is staves. So the Prince of Staves in my deck. So this is that young man, and let's see your Prince of Wands.
Yeah, he's the Prince of Wands. I like seeing actual fire in fire cards. I like seeing fire in fire cards. I like seeing water in water cards. It's pretty easy to see earth in earth cards. So I like when I can see fire. I work very much with the function of elements. So like, what does fire do? What kind of form does it take, or can it take? And so the like presence of fire, the smoke, the smoke as a sacred practice, for this prince, I like that. And I like the story that tells.
I will say about this deck, like many that do this. So there are a number of decks that assign each suit a historical or spiritual tradition. And this deck staves are in an African suit. So we see it's sort of African Egyptian representations of history. The cups are European King Arthur kind of stuff. Swords are feudal Japan, and in this deck, pentacles, or what is it, sacred circles, are indigenous American, I believe. I don't love that. Like I chose this deck to work with, so there's nothing objectively wrong with that. But what I find in decks that do that, assign like one, like this is the ethnic and mythological history of this suit, it feels less flexible to me, and it too easily falls into, like, most decks that I see that do this turn wands into Egypt or Africa. Most decks that I see do this have a European tradition represented in cups. And most decks that I see that do this have Asia in swords. Again, nothing wrong with that, but it is a little like, oh God, don't love that. So I have to say that I don't love that. And I love that Wheel of Change in its courts, there is no, in the majors, like all of the wands cards are one ethnic or cultural representation. Like we see a cross section in those cards, so I'm just going to like that better about your deck. This feels like, let me show you a Prince of Fire in this time and place. So this doesn't feel very descriptive to me. Like yours gives me a feeling, and this feels like a personality, which may be the right move for ancestor work. But as a general tarot card and archetype, I do prefer your card.
To me, this version, the Wheel of Change version, speaks to a function of what does air of fire mean. Like if we're going to use elements as we assign them to court cards, I believe in her deck she assigns princes to air. And so to me, this looks at like, what does it mean when we have air and fire together? And I think that's this. And so that's that. All right, let's go to the cups. We chose the Page or Princess of Cups. I believe we both have a princess. I love the Wheel of Change's Princess of Cups. She is about to party in, like...
She's serving. She's not going to the party. She's serving at the party. I do love that card.
But she's like going into another dimension. I don't know. I love her. She's so fun and playful. The reason I picked the Page of Cups is because I have a soft spot for Page of Cups cards. I think they're just, I don't know. They seem like fun people to be around. And she definitely has that. Again, we get like a story. What does it mean to have cups? What does it mean to have water? Of what would the element for princess be? That's
earth. So earth. Tradition, yeah.
So like, what is earth of water? It's this.
And we see that continuity of the cosmic theme.
Yeah.
So the cup suit literally tells the story of Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot. And this is, so we see these characters of the story. We see her in a few different cards in the suit. I think this is Morgan Le Fay or Morgana. I love this image. I think it is fantastic. I love a good dark witch energy, like doing something dark in the corner, says the woo-woo Catholic. I just love this image. It's nighttime. It feels like earth water magic. Like I just love the sense of this. I don't think, if I pull one card reading for someone who says like, can you tell me where to look for my keys or how the football game is going to go? Like, this might be tricky. This is a good deck for ancestor work. I could do something with your Princess of Cups, but this may be like a sort of limitation of myself as a reader more than my limitation, a limitation of the card itself. But as a piece of art, man, I love this. I think it's beautiful.
I think I could do some stuff with that.
Look in the corner of the room for your keys.
Yeah, or like, have you met any strange women recently? Like, I don't know.
Where were you last night? Like, follow your track. Fair enough. I could do something with this. I could do something with this. I actually, maybe because of that, I just haven't, I will say I haven't read enough with this deck. So some of these reflections that I'm giving are off the cuff and less based on experience actually reading with this deck. So, take my opinions with that in mind. But you have experience working with your deck, don't you?
I have. And I will say there's a difference, like decks that the decks that do map pre-existing stories or myth onto tarot. I think it's great, and I have decks like that I love and I use and I work with all the time, but there does require a little bit, it's more work, right? To say, okay, let me take this myth as it exists within this archetype and apply it to the question that I'm asking. And I think one of the things that I really like that Alexandra Gennady does with this deck is she really, really thinks about like, what is the function of this card, and then depicts it in a way that makes sense to her. It doesn't always make sense to me, but you can see where she's coming from. And and again, we go back to that like function of the card. Like, what is the function of this card? And then how can I make art that depicts that? I think this is Julie Kachia-Watts doing, and I love her work. So like, I hope, I love you. I love the Ma Tarot. It's a favorite of mine. But this is like, what elements from this story can I map onto this suit?
I will say something that I think is to her credit, or the credit of the deck and how to work with it. If you didn't know who this is supposed to be, if I didn't tell you that the cup suit was the story of King Arthur, and you just saw this card in isolation, I don't think you would know that you were missing anything. And I love that about the deck. You don't need any of that. Some decks I do think are so particular in their selection of a mythological figure for a card that you were meaningfully missing something that the creator wants you not to miss. We did a deck study for the Heimdall Tarot, and I struggled with those quartz like crazy. And the name of those representative deities are on the card itself. So Kali is on the card. You're missing something if you know nothing about her. I really like that this simply doesn't ask that of you if you don't have that information. Our next card is what is for me the King of Swords and what is for you the Knight of Swords. Both of these are meant to be fire of air. So let's see. This is, I didn't memorize this. I haven't studied this deck as much as I would like to, but I do know that this is supposed to be a Japanese god, and that he is larger than life. So I think, are supposed to see him as a super god-sized figure rather than a man.
We just have a scientist here. With a mullet.
In a battle, like in a literal battle, my king beats your knight.
Yeah. This isn't my favorite. Again, I kind of go back to what I was referencing earlier. This is not my favorite depiction of the Knight of Swords. However, I see where she's coming from here. Like, this makes sense.
The thinker, the analyst, the dispassionate, yeah.
Yeah, I totally get where she's coming from here. Not my favorite, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be. I think I look at that King of Swords and I don't know what to do with that. And I think that's where my brain would immediately start mapping on archetypes that I know onto the image, because I don't know that the image says to me what the card is, or even what the function of the card is, without knowing.
So I think this King of Swords looks more approachable than the average King of Swords for me. There's something kind of appealing and welcoming about him, but I think you're right. I mean, we see that he has a sword, like a place for his sword, but he's standing on or in water. Great for an ancestral reading, like to pull this card and figure out the story of your ancestors or ancestors that you're reading about. Like, I think that there's a lot of interesting magical stuff to do with this image, but just as a representative of the fire of air archetype, I think that you're right. This is less clear, less instinctive. So, and even though I prefer this art to your art is absolutely clear to me. I know that guy. Like I taught the university with that guy, right? Like he is not interested in feelings. He's running his lab. He has goals. He's paying attention to his work and has very little patience for emotions. So that would be such an easy card to read with. And everyone has seen that guy on TV or knows him. So I think that there's something really helpful about that image as opposed to this one. So this is another one that, like, this goes on my wall next to the other paintings, and your card goes in the spread that I'm like, reading for someone.
All right, and our final court card is the Queen of Pentacles or Queen of Discs.
Another
Queen of Sacred Circles you have.
Yes, ma'am.
I love yours. Just like as an immediate reaction, I love the story that tells. I love her. I love, the Queen of Discs is an archetype that I really struggle with.
Really? Oh, I get it.
And she feels accessible. Like as a personal, like I am not a Queen of Discs type. And they often feel inaccessible to me, and yours feels really accessible.
Let's see yours, and that is the nudity warning. Let us see the lady embodied. Okay. She looks like she's in an African village of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
And working on, is she weaving or something?
Yeah, she's weaving a basket. There's abundance around. There are melons and chickens and various things that grow. And then we have like our cattle in the background leading up to the earth, actually.
These are super clear. I like mine. I like the art, but I do think they tell different stories about the Queen of Discs. This Queen of Discs or my Queen of Sacred Circles is a grandmother to the community. She like sort of reigns at night and watches over, like they both, I think, have nurturing energy. There's something really beautiful though about this, really meditative, but they both do the work. So I just like this art more. I think they both really work well.
So I think we're going to wrap up here because we've been talking for 53 minutes. But we are going to continue this in another video with the minors. We'll go through 12 minors together that we have picked out to show. But yeah, shall we do a little outro reading together?
Yes. And I'm going to tell you now that I'm not shuffling the minors in.
I'm going to do it.
You are. Oh,
there's time to put them back in. There's time to there's time to pull them back out. Okay. So
we each pull a card, and we will see what the cards tell us about how to find balance between art that speaks to us and fixed archetypes within the tarot. Is that the question?
Yeah. So pretty much like the whole, what we're talking about here, how can we find that balance between, if you are a seasoned reader, what you know about tarot, and then letting the art also guide you. And if you are new to tarot, letting yourself get lost in the art, but also doing that learning work, that knowledge work, to understand what it's the underlying structure.
All right, let's see.
Oh, interesting. I got the 3 of Cups.
The minors in that. What, I'm excited for us to talk minors. All right, got the Queen of Staves.
Ooh, fascinating. What do these say to each other? She is so cold. Oh my gosh.
She's standing in front of the water. Is the cup behind her on that water? So she is eyes closed, but in the sun with a solar crown. A lot of like Isis, sexuality, beauty. Very warm scene, animals in the background. This does feel very water of fire.
She feels so rigid to me though. Like there's I don't know. I don't know. I feel like she's missing something. Now I'm just analyzing the art. I'm not reading it. Yeah, I mean, to me,
she is looking, so the way I'm seeing it, she's looking at those cups. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. What's 1 cup?
Or 1 cup.
Mm-hmm. And we have 3 fish underneath it.
Look at you counting.
1, 2, 3. I mean, it's also, you can't see because you're looking at a screen.
It's gold. It's beautiful. It's floating on top of the water. I mean, what would, like, if we're just thinking about how these cards work, this is what would I say? I do think the card, that this art is evocative, but I have more trouble reading it. But I actually find your card a little difficult to read too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a staticness to both of these cards, which I think is really interesting when we talk about balance between 2 things, right? Like, generally speaking, when we think of balance, we think more of like a temperance version of balance, where it's like kind of a give and a take and a back and a forth. And there's not tons of movement in either one of these cards. She is very still. She's stoic. She's looking down. She's not making eye contact with us. Her
eyes are closed. She's not even looking at the cup.
Yeah, she feels very much like a Queen of Swords to me almost. But and then in this 3 of Cups, which traditionally in like Rider-Waite-Smith, we might see like 3 women dancing together with cups. We just have a cup on the surface of the water. There's something growing out of the center of it. We have some lotuses that are budding. They're not bloomed yet. And then we have 3 fish swimming underneath it. And the water is very still in both of these. And so I think if we want to apply this to our question of how we can find balance between the art and like the archetypes, is finding it stillness, like to actually look at what we see, right? Although I don't know, she has her eyes closed.
If we just think of these as 2 pieces of art that both of us are struggling with a little bit, and the water is still, it feels like a kind of argument that like the water is still in these cards. We have to make it move. We're responsible for the movement. The cards aren't going to move. Like the art's not moving. So it is, we are the readers are the unfixed agent of the reading. So the art is the archetype if we're willing to do the work. It feels like a response that's like, you go do it. Like, you're the one who's insisting that there's a difference between the art and the archetype, or like, this is a forced difference you're making. So it feels a little bit like a challenge, because these cards aren't doing a lot. And we're the ones sitting here struggling, like, how do we read this? Like, the labor is our own. And that's interesting. That is a provocation. I think that that's good advice from the cards. let us wrap up. I know that we have some closing business. If you could run us through that.
Yeah, so we have all of our stuff linked below. You can find us on Instagram. Danielle's been doing some really cool things with the blog on our website. So check that out. And we do have some offerings available for readings and mentoring. We can do a deck study together. That would be fun. But we also are going to be having some fun learning opportunities on the horizon. So stay tuned. Keep an eye on our Instagram and our website. We're going to have some things up for offer soon as far as courses and workshops go. But other than that, we will see you in the lab.
See you in the lab, everyone.